A great movie can be great for many different reasons, though generally stems from a winning combination of skillful filmmaking, sharp writing, and strong performances. Yet no movie is perfect, and even the very best ones aren't above being admonished for their mistakes, especially if there's one particular element that just sticks out like a sore thumb. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie with What Culture here with 10 great movies with one terrible element. Number 10. Tarantino's cameo in Django Unchained. Quentin Tarantino has of course appeared in many of his own movies, and while the majority of his performances are entertaining, if not at least passable, there's one toe-curlingly bad exception. Django Unchained is a remarkable piece of work and one of Tarantino's most confident filmmaking efforts. Overconfident even, given that the director gives himself a cameo he's so horribly ill-suited for. Tarantino makes a cameo late in the movie as an Australian slave trader, with the director rocking perhaps the worst attempt at an Australian accent ever committed to film. While you can argue that Tarantino wasn't really trying to be convincing and was just playing the cameo for a campy laugh, it's ultimately more of a cringe-worthy distraction than entertaining, especially coming as late in the movie as it does. The only solace is that his character gets a pretty epic death, being blown to exclusive pulp when Django shoots him right in the dynamite. All the same, it's a scene that aggressively obliterates the audience's immersion and rips them out of what they're watching, which thankfully isn't the case for most of Tarantino's other cameos. Number 9. Choppy action editing in Batman Begins. Anyone who saw Batman Begins in the cinema will surely remember the euphoric joy of watching a great Batman movie again, knowing that rising director Christopher Nolan had successfully restored The Dark Knight's gritty, noir-inspired edge. And though Batman Begins remains an all-timer superhero movie for its sharp script, great performances, and outstanding production, it falls down hard in one key area: the action sequences. More to the point, the majority of the film's set pieces are cut to choppy oblivion by Lee Smith, who later won an Oscar for editing Nolan's Dunkirk. Now, it's quite possible that this wasn't Smith's fault, and he was either working with insufficient action coverage from Nolan, who at the time was inexperienced as a blockbuster filmmaker, or Nolan simply chose to disguise the film's mediocre fight choreography with fast cuts. Either way, from the opening prison brawl to Bruce Wayne's icy clash with Ra's al Ghul, and the otherwise awesome Batmobile chase, far too many of the action beats are spliced to shreds, rather than simply holding and letting them breathe. Thankfully, Nolan improved significantly in this regard for his two subsequent Batman movies, even if the fight choreography was still not great. Number 8. The corny musical score in The Princess Bride. The Princess Bride is such a wonderfully charming, funny, and brilliantly conceived piece of work that it feels bad to say even a single derisive word about it. But come on, the musical score sucks, alright? The score was famously composed by Dire Straits frontman Mark Knopfler, who made the eccentric choice to record almost the entire score with a synclavier sampling machine. To say that the corny synth orchestral arrangement has aged poorly is quite the understatement indeed. It simply sounds incongruous and poorly suited to the film's frothy fantasy adventure stylings, and has only felt more so with the passing of decades. If Knopfler couldn't or wouldn't use a proper orchestra, he should have considered another approach instead. Somewhat fittingly, the score was performed live by a real orchestra in 2021, which one can only imagine must have sounded much better than the distractingly cheeseball work that ended up in the movie itself. Number 7. Bland cinematography in The Avengers. The impact and influence of 2012's The Avengers cannot be understated. It was the successful culmination of the Marvel Cinematic Universe's mission to unite its focal heroes, and courtesy of writer-director Joss Whedon, it turned out to be an absolute blast. Yet, for all of its iconic and unforgettable moments, both character banter and jaw-dropping action, it's a profoundly boring-looking movie from a visual perspective. After all, why push the aesthetic boat out for the biggest superhero movie of all time at the time, right? Ever since the Avengers release, many have criticised the film's cinematography for looking like a TV show. This is in part because of the decision to shoot the movie in a 1.85:1 aspect ratio to ensure that all of the Avengers, from Black Widow to the Hulk, could be easily captured in the frame. But beyond that, Whedon is clearly more accustomed to the world of TV, characterised by more utilitarian, less creative camera work comprised of extensive close-ups, hence why so much of the framing and camera setups, well, feel like TV. Beyond that, it also sets the MCU's house style firmly in place, utilising flat lighting and a washed-out colour palette with a disconcerting emphasis on muddy grey tones, as has been a frustrating bugbear of the franchise ever since. And while nobody's not going to watch the Avengers because it lacks visual imagination, you'd reasonably expect more from a film with so much potential to bring famous comic book panels to vibrant life. Number 6. Dubbing all the dialogue in The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. A possibly scorching hot take incoming here, but while Sergio Leone's The Good, the Bad and the Ugly is an unassailable Western masterpiece, the dubbing is a distracting intrusion we all put up with because the rest of the movie is so frickin' awesome. At the time of the film's 1966 release, it was standard practice in Italian cinema to shoot films without synchronized sound and simply redub the dialogue later. And The Good, the Bad and the Ugly is no different. The diverse international cast all spoke in their native languages, with Clint Eastwood, Eli Wallach and Lee Van Cleef later redubbing their own English dialogue, while most of the movie's other characters had their lines redubbed into English by unknown performers. It's a result of the movie simply being made where it was in the time that it was, yet nevertheless creates a fissure in its layer of immersion, and one that's on occasion unintentionally hilarious. Things got even worse and weirder for the 2002 extended edition, which restored 14 minutes of cut scenes that hadn't had any voiceover previously recorded. And so Eastwood and Wallach returned to record their lines 35 years after the movie's original release, while the deceased Van Cleef was dubbed over by a new actor. This dubbing was criticised by many fans due to Eastwood and Wallach simply sounding distractingly older during these scenes, while Van Cleef's vocal double simply wasn't convincing enough at all. Number 5. The obvious dummy in Casino. Martin Scorsese's Casino is one epic meal of a movie, a 3-hour masterclass in writing, direction and acting from its ensemble cast, albeit one that requires getting over an outrageously awful moment in its opening 60 seconds. The first shot of the movie shows protagonist Sam Ace Rothstein walking to his car and getting in it just as a car bomb detonates, seemingly killing him. Scorsese attempts to seamlessly cut between a shot of Robert De Niro getting into the car and a locked-off shot of De Niro replaced with a dummy as the car blows up, except the dummy is hilariously obvious. It doesn't help that the cut itself is surprisingly noticeable, but the blatantly plastic dummy sat in the driver's seat renders the whole sequence an unintentional howler. It's an infamous enough gaffe that many fans have called for Scorsese to fix the scene with modern visual effects, as replacing the dummy with De Niro could be done with relative ease today. Hell, even a fan edit of the scene looks way better. Part of the problem, as with so many other movies, is that nobody foresaw the visual fidelity of Blu-ray coming, and Scorsese likely assumed nobody would ever be able to freeze frame the offending moment at a high enough resolution for it to be that noticeable. All the same, in a film with so many note-perfect choices, this feels like pure amateur hour for a world-class filmmaker. Number 4. Too many lens flares in Star Trek. In spite of basement-low expectations from Star Trek fans, J.J. Abrams' big-budget Trek reboot was a pleasant surprise indeed. Fun, emotionally satisfying, brilliantly cast, and slick in a good way. The single big mistake, though? Those damn lens flares. Now, lens flares can certainly add visual pizzazz to a scene, but Abrams went outrageously overboard on both of his Trek films, bathing the majority of the shots, especially those on board the Enterprise, in lens flares to the point of distraction. Abrams even admitted that he deliberately shone powerful lights at the camera lens to create even more flares in an attempt to give his film a unique aesthetic. And unique is one thing, but good? Something else entirely. It quickly became a running joke that Abrams was addicted to lens flares, something his own wife even pointed out while he was shooting sequel Star Trek Into Darkness, prompting him to pull back on the technique. But Trek 09 is often rendered laughable by the sheer parody-level number of lens flares in any given shot, an aesthetic choice that feels ridiculously dated barely a decade after the movie's release. Number 3. Keanu Reeves' performance in Bram Stoker's Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula is arguably Francis Ford Coppola's last truly great movie, an intoxicating stylistic fever dream of a movie that bleeds mood and atmosphere from its every pore, courtesy of the all-timer cinematography, production design, makeup, costumes, and sound. And Gary Oldman gobbling up the scenery like he's starving to death, of course. While many fans will concede that Winona Ryder's English accent as Mina Harker isn't great, it's permissible enough. Especially compared to Keanu Reeves, who, for as much as we love him, delivers surely the single worst English accent ever attempted in a major movie. Reeves looks the part, but he sounds less like a persuasive take on Jonathan Harker than an SNL parody of how ridiculous it'd be for Keanu Reeves to play Jonathan Harker. Even Coppola himself admitted that Reeves tried so hard to nail the accent that he only came off more stilted as a result. It's a laughable piece of an otherwise magnificent film, yet Dracula's pull is so mesmerising that it's thankfully able to withstand Reeves' risible performance. Number 2. Hideous CGI in Black Panther. Black Panther was a major breath of fresh air when it was released in 2018, showing a totally fresh side of the MCU, successfully endearing the audience to T'Challa and company and offering up one of the series' strongest villains to date. Yet as Marvel Studios faces increasing criticism for the uneven quality of its film's CGI and the alleged maltreatment of the visual effects companies it works with, it really all goes back to Black Panther. Black Panther was the first MCU movie to receive major pushback for its low-rent visual effects. For as lovingly rendered as the Wakandan cityscapes are throughout, the third act is a damn hot mess of unconvincingly gooey video gamey CGI. First there's those blurry but ugly war rhinos, and worst of all there's the climactic battle between T'Challa and Eric Killmonger, which combines lo-fi textures with janky physics to resemble a dated video game tech demo. Visual effects artists who worked on the film have squarely blamed Marvel Studios for not giving them enough time to complete the work to a satisfactory standard. Considering that the recent Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, granted in no way a great movie, was similarly dinged for its mediocre-looking CGI, it appears that little has actually changed. Number 1. Ugly colour grading in Women Talking. Sarah Polley's Women Talking is one of the most critically acclaimed films of the past year, as well as receiving Oscar nominations for Best Picture and Best Adapted Screenplay. It's a brilliantly acted, towering meditation on patriarchal oppression, forgiveness and faith, but also one of the ugliest movies to ever receive a Best Picture nod. While cinematographer Luc Montpellier does a totally rock-solid job with the actual framing of the movie's images, filmmaker Sarah Polley's decision to grade the movie's colours to near monochrome isn't merely distracting, it's hideous. Though Polley desaturated the movie's colours with the apparent intent to have it reflect the female protagonist's own embattled lives, is that visual allegory really worthwhile when it produces a film so actively unpleasant to look at? It's tough not to feel like the hard work from the cast and crew was trampled all over by a clumsy, unnecessary aesthetic choice that makes an otherwise terrific piece of work look like an abject eyesore. This technique feels very film school, despite Polley being a reputed filmmaker of considerable talent, and may well have contributed to her missing out on a Best Director nomination. And that concludes our list. If you think we missed any, then do let us know in the comments below, and while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. Also, head over to Twitter and follow us there, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with What Culture. I hope you have a magical day, and I'll see you real soon.